Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Gavin, Schall, Alex, Wolfe. Alex, somehow we made it 4 days into the month without having a mailbag. Insanity. We had to remedy that, so we're doing it right now. What are we going to get into?
Yeah, normally we play that card way earlier because we love getting all these questions from people. In the first part of today's mailbag, we're going to get into a few questions. We got like some questions about some players that worked out for the Knicks today. So a little bit of mix of news and mailbag. We'll talk about what moves in draft and free agency would really make us irritated this year. We'll talk about how we would build a team using only players in this draft class and how that team would do, or how we think that team would do, and talk about whether Jaden Ivey and trading up for him could maybe be more of a curse than a gift. So we'll get into that next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, and today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Check out prizepicks.com and use promo code NBA or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. And who's talking to you? I'm Gavin Schall, a play-by-play broadcaster. He is Alex Wolfe, editor-in-chief of The Strickland, the greatest Knicks website out there. And we wanted to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. We're now available on all platforms, including, you guessed it, if you can see us right now, on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, maybe you didn't guess it, but then you should definitely go check us out on YouTube. Throw us a subscription, throw us a like, throw us some comments. We love all the interaction we can get. Speaking of which, Alex, we have some solicited interaction today. It's called a mailbag. Where are we starting?
Yeah, this is a question from one of my faves, going by currently on Twitter. You what, mate? At Jax365, one of our faves from over the pond. So this one was directed right at me, but I'll let you answer too, Gavin. And this also gives us a little bit of a news dump for today. So Dyson Daniels worked out for the Knicks today, as well as Malaki Branham and Ty Washington. So 3 players in the Knicks range. There might have been some other second round or so players involved in that workout as well, but we only heard about Dyson, Malaki, and Ty. And so Jax365 wants to know, so Alex, your and my son Dyson was working out for the Knicks, because Jax and I are both huge Dyson Daniels fans. How does that make you feel? Well, in short, it makes me feel good. I'm glad that they're interested in him. I feel like it was already pretty well known that they're interested in him, because he was, he said at the combine that the Knicks had interviewed him and that it had went pretty well, and that, it seemed like they were fairly interested in him. I do worry a bit whether he's going to make it to them or not. Ian Begley noted today that Dyson Daniels said he has upcoming workouts with Indiana, Detroit, and Washington. That's 3 teams ahead of the Knicks. So, do the math. He's apparently getting some top 10 buzz now. I wonder a bit if some of these rumors about the Knicks wanting to trade up, if Daniels is a guy that they potentially look at as a guy worth trading up for. I don't know that they could do anything to get around like Detroit or Indiana selecting him, because I don't think they could get that high necessarily. And if you're going to get that high and then Daniels ends up getting taken, I feel like you could just take Shaedon Sharpe or Jaden Ivey or whoever else happens to fall. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm happy about Dyson interviewing or working out for the Knicks, I guess I should say. I think it's a good sign. I like that that's the type of player that they're interested in, but I still have my same worries that he might go before the Knicks.
Yeah, I think he's going to be gone, is my gut feeling. He just, it's this funny thing, right? When you first start falling in love with a draft prospect and you almost, and this wasn't necessarily the case with Dyson, but I don't know, over the years, Alex, maybe you've experienced this too. It's happened to me a bunch, where the guy's like projected to go a few picks behind where your team of choice is picking. And you're saying, well, maybe it'll be considered a slight reach, but I'm just in love with this dude. And then he slowly starts to move up and you're like, oh, amazing. He might actually end up on the team I want. But then it just keeps going. You're like, no, wait, stop. Everyone just stop talking to him. And then he just ends up going 5 picks ahead of you. I feel like that's where we're at with Dyson, right? Like he's overshot the New York Knicks. The flashes of athleticism, of skill level, the shot making down the stretch of the season. The dude just looks and acts and seems like a top 10 pick to me. And if the Knicks are lucky enough to get him, that'll be fantastic. But I'm with you. I think it'll take a move up. I'm also interested in that Malaki Branham worked out for the New York Knicks. And I wonder if they see him as someone who can come in and play immediately, given that production at Ohio State, given that efficiency that he flashed. I like now when the Knicks bring in someone in that I like, because in years past I was like, oh, I'm off the mark. This guy's going to suck. And now I'm like, oh, I figured it out. He's going to be really good.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we'll just conveniently ignore the Ty Washington part of that whole equation.
I wasn't going to comment on it.
Yeah, we'll just leave that go. So we'll move on to the next question from Jax365, a very Jax first segment here. Jax wants to know, what moves in the draft and free agency this summer would you hate for the Knicks? So, Gavin, I'll throw it to you first. Just one move in the draft and one move in free agency you would absolutely hate for the Knicks.
Yeah, in the draft, Mark Williams, Jeremy Wu of Sports Illustrated had him going there in his mock draft today. And it's not really anything against Mark Williams. I think potentially very solid NBA player. I just think if you're taking a center at pick 11, and this was kind of the case that Jake Rosen made when he was on the podcast both this weekend and on Monday, that you need to take someone who's very scheme versatile. And that's what I like about someone like Jalen Duren, who can cover on the perimeter and do a really credible job protecting the rim. And then an offense can rim run, but also at least flashes some semblance of some passing and maybe down the road a little bit of a mid-range jump shot. And look, I'm not the world's grandest Mark Williams expert. Maybe he's flashed some of those things as well, but to me, he strikes me a little bit more in the Mitchell Robinson mold, but maybe not even as good as Mitchell Robinson. So that doesn't really get me going. But Alex, I'll throw that back at you. Give me one in the draft that would upset you.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much on board with you. Like, if it was someone like Mark Williams, Ty Washington, honestly, is a pick that I would not love, because I just feel like the Knicks should be going for a different archetype than like Immanuel Quickley, who they already have. I understand Ty's not, no two players are exactly alike, but there's enough similarities there where I'm like, why? Like, just why would you go for him when you already know you have Quickley on the roster? Other than that, I guess just like a colossal reach. Although even that, I don't know, I'd almost be tempted to give Perrin the benefit of the doubt, but I also would just be like, well, is that like a missed opportunity to trade down a couple spots? But it seems like in the last few years, the Knicks have had a pretty good read on like who's going to go where. And, like after they took Quickley, and it sort of bamboozled us a little bit, there was reports that he might have gone like the next pick or two to the Nuggets, which honestly tracks, because then they went after Bones Highland the next year, who's very similar to Quickley. Same deal with Quentin Grimes. There was reports that I think it might have been the Nuggets again. I think the Nuggets were involved like twice in these discussions where they were looking at Grimes being like, oh yeah, we're definitely going to take him at like pick 26 or whatever. And the Knicks slid in right where they had to take Grimes. So, they certainly have not been shy about moving around on draft night. So I guess if they did just suddenly decide to get shy about moving around and then make a reach, even if it's for someone like Mark Williams, if they determine like Mark Williams is the dude, I think that they should probably try to trade back as far as they think they can possibly get without losing out on him. Because I think, to me at least, I would rather take someone, in that situation, you're going to take like Atari Eason, who projects to be more versatile, more switchy, that sort of thing than like a standard center. So I think that's where I'm at with that. As far as a free agency move, I don't really know. I mean, I gun to my head, I don't even know like who's, other than like Brunson, who we talk about all the time. I don't know who like the big name free agents are this year, like Zach LaVine, I guess. But
yeah,
I guess it would just be like if the Knicks went all out to
I was thinking Colin Sexton was the name I was thinking in my head.
Okay,
and not even that. I would just get a little bit of a queasy feeling if they gave Colin Sexton 5 years, because it could work, right? I mean, we did the whole podcast with Chris Manning of Locked On Cavs, and he talked me into the idea that Sexton, like the ball hogginess was a little bit overblown, that he could potentially fit in, but I would have concerns of like you're almost bringing him in then to be your number one guy. And I think that and RJ, I just don't know how those two really jive together. I think it would be sort of a slippery slope, and it would sort of strike me as kind of an old Knicks signing versus a forward-thinking new Knicks signing.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, I guess it's just don't overpay anybody and don't give up a ton. Like, I guess you could lump like a Donovan Mitchell trade into free agency as well, because that would take place during free agency in all likelihood. And if they like go all out and trade like the whole core, that would annoy me, because I'd be like, this just isn't the right time. Like, you're pulling the trigger at the wrong time here. So I think that's my my rough answer there. It's just don't do anything rash. I mean, I'm not even saying that last year they did anything that hamstrung them, but just like don't take the next step from last year and say like, oh, last year wasn't enough. Let's give up everything to try to get back to the playoffs, this coming year, because then I think you just put yourself in a situation like you were during the Melo years where you've given up so much that you have maybe your like star player, but you don't have enough capital or cap space or anything else to like build around that player, and then you just kind of get stuck in like low to mid seed territory for 3-4 years, and it's just it feels like a wasted opportunity, and you don't get to see all these young players grow that you went ahead and drafted. So I think that's my only thing that I really would take huge objection to.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. With that, Alex, I want to take a quick second to tell everyone a little bit about one of our sponsors, and that is, of course, Prize Picks. All right, NBA fans, are you looking for a daily fantasy option for the NBA? Then you need to try the award-winning app Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. I love it, and we know you will too. You can pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry. And it's just you versus the projected numbers. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. PrizePicks offers a variety of options. PrizePicks offers any prop you can think of, from points scored to rebounds, even steals. PrizePicks even allows mixed sport entries, so you could take more goals by the New York Rangers or runs allowed by the New York Yankees. I don't know, both are going to be pretty low because my favorite teams are doing great. And PrizePicks doesn't just offer NBA; they have options on college basketball, college football, NFL, MLB, soccer, MMA, and more. So for a limited time, PrizePicks has an exclusive, no-brainer of an offer for all of our users. Users get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores just a single point. But you must use code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer available to Locked On fans. Sign up today and use code NBA for $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. All right, Alex, I'm super excited to get into this next question. You and I we're talking about a little pre-show. One of the better questions we've gotten in a minute, and it comes from Ricky Rodriguez at R_Rod84. And he said, if you could build an NBA roster with just this year's draft class, who would those players be? And what would their record be at the end of the season? So I have a feeling our teams are going to be pretty similar, but who would you throw out there?
Yeah, this is kind of tough because this is like one of those years where there's not a tailor-made point guard prospect, which we've already talked about, right? So that was the toughest part of this equation to me. And I think ultimately it would probably hold this team back. So I think if you build draft class 2022 team, they're going to struggle a bit with who's going to be initiating and stuff for the first year and who's going to be able to like really run the offense. And I think maybe that leads to you sort of tanking a bit, like strategically, and then maybe getting a chance to get like Scoot Henderson next year, who's like, a maestro and, will be like potentially one of those like high level point guard prospects that comes out every number of years. So with that in mind, I sought to sort of build in the starting lineup the best like point guard by committee that I could, or at least like ball handler initiator by committee that I could. So I did Jaden Ivey as the quote unquote one. He's not really a point guard, and I know that a lot of people keep saying like the Knicks need to move up for him because he's a point guard. He's not a point guard. He's a shooting guard who can do some stuff with the ball. Johnny Davis, same deal, shooting guard who could do some stuff with the ball. So I think put 2 guys out there that can handle the ball, let them maybe develop their skills a bit. So I put Johnny Davis in there. Also, Johnny, I think, gives you a really solid floor at that 2 spot, even if maybe the ceiling's limited or something. But, he's a guy we just talked about recently on the show, and we've been talking about a lot lately as a guy who could maybe in the Knicks range be a potential steal. So, if you throw him out there, see what you can get. Then the top 3 guys, Jabari Smith, Paolo Banchero, and Chet Holmgren, I have as my 3, 4, 5. Jabari, I think, maybe profiles to be a 4 throughout his career, more so than a 3. But you and I were talking about this pre-show. I think you can guard those positions. So just throw him out there. He's a defensive menace. Have a super long lineup. Paolo might, take the threes on some nights too, depending on who it is. But I think that gives you some versatility from 3 to 5. And Paolo also has a little bit of that, initiator and some passing chops and stuff like that in him. So maybe you can almost have him play sort of a Julius Randle role in a way, like good Julius Randle. And then bench, I had AJ Griffin for shooting, I think he's, no matter what, I have some reservations about him, but I think that no matter what, he's going to be a good shooter. Keegan Murray, who I just think is going to be super productive and might lead to some, if we want to make another Knicks analogy, he might become the Obi Toppin, where everybody starts begging for him to play more because he's so efficient and so awesome and scores so much and so easily. Tari Eason, just for his versatility as like a wing big type dude. Shaden Sharp, maybe he starts off really well in his rookie year. Maybe he takes some seasoning, but your team is literally all rookies, so you could take those chances and, just kind of have him develop along with these guys. Dyson Daniels, one of my favorites, who I think would be really, really versatile. Jalen Duren, because he's a more traditional big man prospect that you could sort of throw out there, potentially even with Chet, do like a Twin Towers type lineup. But, I think just having the most talented, presumably, or at least best block of clay true center that you can get out of the draft, you may as well take him and throw him on this team and just see what happens. And then Benedict Mathurin in my final spot. And these were in no particular order. I think they're all really valuable players. I'll hold off on what my win prediction is though until you give your team. Although I get the feeling it's probably pretty similar. Probably be easier to just be like, who do you have that's different?
Okay, yeah. So I'll throw out my differences. This was a late pivot, but I put in Kennedy Chandler out of Tennessee as my starting point guard because, to your point, I initially had Ivy and Sharp in there, and I was thinking this would just be such a broken offense against NBA defenses, having no one because Ivy again played off the ball mostly at Purdue. You're already going to struggle with a team full of rookies, but if you don't have the one guy who is sort of that made from God point guard, then it's just going to be complete chaos, and it's going to be you could feasibly have a 20-30 game losing streak with that team of all rookies going against NBA competition. Maybe they all get hot one night. There's a lot of talent there, but I picked Kennedy Chandler. Maybe Andrew Nembhard would have been the better pick, but yeah, he was my one difference in my starting lineup. I really do think that front line of Smith, Banchero, and Chet could work just because there's so much versatility and creativity there and a whole lot of passing. I think Chet gets underrated as a passer a lot. Ivy's a talented passer. I think Banchero, especially during that NCAA tournament run, showed some flashes of leveraging his scoring ability and just making life really easy for others. And then in my bench, there wasn't really a lot of differences, except I had Johnny Davis on my bench. And then my last two spots, I can't remember who was different than yours exactly, but I had Malaki Branham in there, and I had Jalen Williams in there. Branham just because I think he's an NBA ready-made shot maker, and him and Johnny Davis as pick and roll operators are pretty advanced for their ages. And then Williams, I just think is versatile and just really, really smart, and someone who can have sort of a multiplicative effect with all the skilled wings you have. So I just loaded up on athleticism and skill and savvy, and I think they're a team that could win maybe 12 games. I don't know. How do you feel about your squad?
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe 15. I don't know, they would surprise some people. It's pretty tough to. I mean, you got to remember 12 games is almost pace for worst season ever. It's pretty close.
Charlotte was something like 12.
Yeah, I don't.
They went 7-59 in the abbreviated year post.
Yeah, so whatever that extrapolates out to, it's really close to 12 wins in a full 82 game slate. So I would say maybe 15 wins. I mean, they're going to struggle. They're all rookies. There's no veteran presence on this team. It's going to be like you threw together the G League Ignite again, and just threw them against, except for they don't have Jarrett Jack there to see them across the finish line, So yeah, I think they would struggle. I'll just say 15 wins and be kind to them. They would not win a lot. You'd be hoping that you could get Wembanyama the next year or Scoot Henderson or someone like that and really start building the team out sooner than later. You also might just use some of those guys as trade chips. I don't know. But I don't hate your idea of going with a Jalen Williams also. I was going to maybe throw Ousmane Dieng in there as well as another high upside bet. I think that's maybe in this immediate aftermath of this exercise, my only regret is maybe not going for more high upside guys other than just Sharp, as far as guys that might have a vastly different level to them 2-3 years down the line than what they'll come into the league with. But granted, there's always guys like that. Ivy might have a vastly different level to himself, where he becomes I don't know, John Morant, Donovan Mitchell, that level of player. So yeah, I think that's my only regret, is maybe not as crazy as it sounds, that would almost mean taking off someone like Mathurin, who I think is going to be really good in the NBA. And, going with someone like that, who's maybe more of a question mark, but has more like the crazy frame and like potential defensive instincts and stuff, that just needs to like tighten up their handle and like learn how to shoot in the NBA, that you have to wait like 2-3 years on. Like, this is a team that you would not be winning with anytime for the next like 3-4 years probably. So I think maybe that's my only thing is, if you're essentially starting like a new Oklahoma City Thunder. So
do you think that team wins a title in 10 years? I think that would be an interesting exercise, because obviously this is just us guessing who's going to be good, but going back to each draft and saying, if you take the top 10, how automatic would that team be to win a championship? Because I don't know. I think with this draft, it's a little dicey, right? Maybe you get 2 all NBA guys out of that group, and you probably get 4 or 5 really solid role players. But with this year's draft, I don't know if that's a lock by any means. When there are some years like last year's, you take the preconceived top 10 and you look at that team now, and you're just loaded, right? You got Jalen Green, Evan Mobley, Kate Cunningham, Barnes, and Franz Wagner, and they just fit together so well too. Like, I look at that team and I say, you give me 12 years of that group, I'm winning maybe 2 titles, maybe 3 titles. With this team, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, I think that the value, more so than the players themselves in this draft, would be like, you would have to nail it with whoever you got from tanking for a couple years. Like, I don't think this team, if these are the only guys you're allowed to have, and it's just like you go like pure like NBA 2K experiment and say like all your draft picks are null and void, like you don't get to make any more picks, and this core of like the whole lottery or whatever of the 2022 draft is all you can roll with. Yeah, I don't necessarily think that this team would win a championship or get particularly close. I think that this draft, that's what we've heard about the top end of this draft and the middle and everything else. It's like a lot of good role players, but maybe not that like A1 star that you need. And maybe Paolo turns into that, or maybe Ivy turns into that, maybe Holmgren turns into that, or Jabari Smith, but like, I wouldn't be betting on that to happen. And you would probably need at least 2 of those guys turn into all NBA guys for that to happen. And I don't know that I would necessarily see that happening. So you would pretty much just have to bank on like, using these guys to be the good role players when you nail that star, whether it's like Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson or something like that. It sort of reminds me in a way of like the Knicks core right now, like where it's like, I don't necessarily know that RJ Barrett, Immanuel Quickley, and Obi Toppin as a core to a team could win you a championship by themselves, but you insert like an A1 star into that without dismantling the whole rest of this group that they've built. And then maybe you're talking about something. So I think that's how I'd probably feel about this 2022 group in the long run.
I'll give you one last pivot question. Would you trade the entire Knicks roster to have this as your team right now?
I think it would be foolish not to. Yeah. I mean, I would. I believe in the Knicks roster right now, but you get a whole lottery, and let's say that you just hand Walt Perrin the first 14 picks and say, build this team. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I would do that. I would do that in a heartbeat. Like, sorry, RJ, sorry, IQ, whatever. Yeah, I would do it.
There are some drafts where it would backfire though, but the majority you would turn out. You're going to end up with some really, really good players.
Every single draft lottery has a couple all-stars in it. So if you get like 3 all-stars out of your 14 picks, boom, you're in good shape. Like, and if some of the other guys work out into role players, you've got a good team right there.
Maybe the more interesting question is how many teams wouldn't trade their current roster for this. It's probably only a couple, but
maybe top 12 or something, top 12 teams, maybe, because some of the veteran laden teams probably wouldn't do it just because they're legitimately competing for championships.
Yeah, they don't want to wait 10 years. Or 5
exactly.
Years.
So, but a lot of teams probably would. Maybe not the Thunder. Like the Thunder probably look at themselves.
The Thunder, like, this is our team already, man.
Yeah.
we don't need to redo it.
I think Presti would be sniffing his own farts enough to be like, no, I wouldn't do that. But most other like rebuilding teams would do it. But anywho, I just had to quickly let everybody know about Built Bars before we get into our final question for this show. So don't you guys love chewy, chocolatey brownies? What about a caramel brownie with caramel swirled on top? It's so good. What if I told you that you could have all that chewy, chocolatey deliciousness plus 17 grams of protein? You're in luck, because caramel brownie bars are available at built.com right now. And you got to act fast because they are a fan favorite. Forget about dessert. These are better than dessert. Plus, the macros are unreal. 130 calories, 17 grams of protein, and only 4 grams of sugar. I would replace a regular brownie with Built caramel brownie bar in a heartbeat, because regular brownies are not good for you, even if they taste good. these are. The best part, caramel brownie bars are still covered in 100% real chocolate. Like for real, with Built Bar, you don't have to sacrifice tasty for healthy. You can have both. And there are a million reasons that you should try Built Bars. But for now, let's just say the caramel brownie will rock your world. And that is not an understatement. With Built, tasty is the new healthy. Go to built.com and get your new box of caramel brownie bars now. The best part is you don't have to pay full price. Go to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you will get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, Gavin, we are on to our final question. This one is a bit of a doozy. So I will warn you, this is going to be a bit of a monologue. This is a long question. Came from D Brown at the Mighty D Rock on Twitter. And D Brown wants to know, for the mailbag, was too large to fit in the response section. You're not kidding, D, but it's a good question, so I'll read the whole thing. As documented on this here platform, I have been a Jaden Ivey enthusiast for some time. However, because pragmatic questions should be asked to counter every notion, depending on how you, generally speaking, feel about Quick being the guy at point guard, coupled with RJ's need for the ball in his hands, does an Ivy Quick RJ lineup have potential to be one of those too many guys who need the ball in their hands scenario? Would I be ecstatic if they did something exciting for once and went up without giving up too much and got Ivy? 10,000%. Do I feel such a way that you take the talent and worry about it later? Sometimes yes, but not always. And this is where I'm a bit more nuanced and say it's easy to say there's a good or it's easy to say that's a good problem to have. I say if the word problem is in your sentence, then you maybe are not as well off as you thought. Just some food for thought that as much as I've wanted us to get Ivy, maybe it's not so bad if we end up with AJ or Dyson or Malaki. This again seriously hinges on Quick genuinely being a legit starter going forward or not. And though I posed this question, I do personally feel that the three could coexist. And I'm pretty sure we're all hoping to find out. Let's play devil's advocate for a minute, Gavin. Do you think that there's a chance that getting Ivy on this team and having a Quickley Ivy RJ lineup could potentially be a scenario where not all the guys can play to their strengths enough because they all need the ball too much?
There's always a chance, but no would be my answer. I just don't think, and he put this qualifier in the question, but I don't think IQ or RJ are established enough to start thinking that way, where you're like, all right, can we really throw a third guy in there? And you also don't know what Ivy's going to be. And the fact is that Ivy played off the ball at Purdue and was pretty good doing it. And Jake was talking about that yesterday, how he can weaponize his speed on off-ball cuts. And I think just more than anything else, the Knicks really need that injection of athleticism. If I were to build someone to play off of Immanuel Quickley, I would want Ivy, especially with Quickley's newfound ability to win off the dribble. I think that would be a terror for opposing defenses, especially if Ivy's jump shot translates at a high level to the NBA. I think Ivy would be incredibly good for RJ in transition and giving RJ head starts when he just shoots by his guy and then the defense is rotating over and he's swinging out to RJ on either wing. And RJ, for probably the first time in his career, would consistently be attacking defenses in rotation instead of trying to bully his way through 3 or 4 guys in a static defense. I think Ivy makes a lot of sense. Do I think he's a perfect fit? No, just because the Knicks perpetually, I mean, especially if Julius Randle's still starting at power forward, maybe even more so if Obi Toppin's starting at power forward, the Knicks perpetually need shooting. So in that sense, Ivy isn't completely proven in that aspect of his game. Maybe it's a slightly iffy fit, but I think his athleticism more than offsets that. And I think he would make life easier for IQ and RJ more so than more difficult. But what about you, Alex?
Yeah, I also don't really worry about it too much. I think my main reasoning is that, I mean, maybe I worry a little bit that Ivy would have to find ways to become useful without the ball because although he wasn't even necessarily like handling the ball that much at Purdue either. Like Prez notes this all the time, but like they ran sort of a weird system where they're kind of like running their offense through their center. And so, there was a lot of times where like Ivy was sort of like, having to make cuts and stuff like that, and not necessarily having the ball in his hands all the time. So he's sort of learned how to do that. And that's why, in terms of RJ and IQ, that I'm not too worried is because they, for better or worse, you could say like maybe it's been to their detriment at times, thanks to how things have gone with Randle a bit. But for better or worse, they've cut their teeth as off-ball players first and then gotten to get their reps on ball. So like IQ got a lot of time with Derrick Rose in his first season, getting to be off ball and having catch and shoot opportunities and stuff like that. And yes, he's handled the ball too and generated his own offense and started to get way better at generating for himself and others at the end of this season. But he still knows how to take a stationary jump shot. He knows how to move without the ball and get around a screen and, take a shot off of that. He's done those things before and he could do that again. And RJ Barrett, same deal. Like, he really cut his teeth and like learned how to be a good 3-point shooter in 2021 by essentially being a spot up guy for most of the year. And, just hitting tons of wide open threes that were generated for him by Randall, which was the better of the for better or worse arrangement there. And then, RJ then this year started taking over more on ball reps and, being like the primary creator on the team and, working more to get buckets on the inside and generate looks for others and stuff like that. So I don't worry too much about it. Like, I just think all you have to do is just have guys that can survive with or without the ball in their hands. And because of the context of their careers so far, RJ and Quickley already know how to do that. So it's not like they would have to learn how to give up the ball suddenly. And for that reason, I don't worry too much about an Ivy fit. My biggest thing is the other part of D's question, which is just like, would the Knicks have to give up too much to make this happen? I would care more about giving up too many of the young prospects on the team to move up to create that core of three that maybe isn't a sure thing than I would be of just what the core is in a vacuum.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. I think the Knicks are in BPA mode to some extent, and I think this is where I think it's an interesting philosophical question, right? Because I've always thought BPA is sort of a misnomer because it's only best player available if he can access all of his abilities in the context of your system, in the context of your roster, and if he accentuates the abilities of the guys already on the team in the context of your roster. But I think Jaden Ivey is not someone I have that concern about. Jake brought this up when he was on, but Shaedon Sharpe is maybe someone that's a more realistic concern about. Jaden Ivey, I think he can play with anyone, anywhere. When you have that kind of speed and athleticism, those types of passing instincts, and his mom, a legendary coach. He was. You could tell he's been groomed to, if not be a point guard in the NBA, to be a very savvy player in the NBA. So he's not someone I have those concerns about.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. And I don't think I really have too much more to add because, again, it to me, it all just comes down to the price to get Jaden Ivey. But if the Knicks find themselves in a position to get him and the cost isn't too astronomical, I would support the move 100%. I can't. It's hard to even play devil's advocate on it because I just don't see it not working out, to be honest. I think I've said all the way back since, I don't know, November, December, like when I first started giving like cursory looks at like the draft prospects back when Ivy was still in the realistic Knicks range at the time of like 7 to 8 pick or so. I was saying, like, is there a more perfect prospect for the Knicks than Jaden Ivey? I don't think so. And of course, that's probably what a lot of other teams are saying too. And that's why he's moved up into the consensus top 4 now. But we'll see what happens. But I think no matter what, it's a gamble worth taking with Jaden Ivey. But Gavin, I think we could probably wrap this show up. This first part of the mailbag, we have some more questions. So there will be multiple parts to this. We have a bunch from our all-star question asker, Jordan Bubb, who sends us tons of questions for the mailbag. So we'll have some episodes dedicated to some of those questions. But if you're watching or listening to this right now and you still have questions that you thought of while you were listening or watching this, then definitely feel free to go on Twitter at Locked On Knicks. We put out a solicitation on there. You could just go answer under that or just tweet us directly, whatever you're feeling, and we'll make sure to include it in a show because we usually try to get to as many questions as we can, if not all of them. So in the meantime, though, thank you all for listening. Thanks for asking questions, and we'll be back tomorrow with another show for you guys. But until then, peace out. Talk to you all soon.